Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis news from January 17th to the 23rd. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. But we're going to start with this Thursday Cannabis chat that Toby Cannabis held with Jason Spatafora, Neil Haman of Advisor Shares, and Curaleaf Executive Chairman Boris Jordan. So I'm just going to play you guys a small snippet, but if you are invested in this industry, I seriously recommend that you consider listening to the entire remainder of 2 hours and 10 minutes to the end, because Boris comes on and gives us 45 minutes of his time. There is a lot of talk previously before that, but I really only listened to the Boris piece, and I recommend you do too. So here's a bit of a snippet.
I just wanted to say that, no, first of all, I try never to teach anybody on how to invest, and I think that everybody's got their own strategy, and frankly, you guys have one of the hardest jobs in this market because, frankly, you're the only major institutional player in the marketplace, and so everyone's always going to be unhappy, but I think what you guys have put together and what you guys have done for the cannabis market is truly remarkable, and so I hope everybody
Thank you very much.
I hope everybody appreciates what these fellows have put together, because without them, this sector would be a lot worse off, I think.
It's true.
It's been a stabilizing factor in these share prices, and the biggest problem, and I've said this before, is that there is no institutional base. I mean, there's no anchor in these companies. And so, one of my biggest worries, and I was watching it today, was the minute you guys start to run out of cash to buy, there's no support. And all the, the fast money hedge funds and all the algorithms are immediately going short on the back of that. And if there's no natural buying, this thing could have a capitulation trade. And we all know what the hedge funds are trying to do here. They're trying to squeeze the retail players out of the market. They think they're weak hands, and they think that they can get another 20% move, and that 20% move is going to force retail to sell because they just can't hold it. They can't handle the pain. And so you guys have been a terrific factor in stabilizing that marketplace. But I think, you guys are pretty transparent, so everybody sees your positions. And I think, if I'm not wrong, and correct me if I'm not wrong, you guys are now fully invested. And
mostly, yes.
Yeah. And so now the problem is we're going to have these hedge funds, saying, okay, there's no natural buying outside of a few maybe institutions that are picking at it at this point in time, and so let's try to take this trade and let's try to bring this market down and squeeze out retail. And I think you're going to see that over the next couple of days. In my view, tomorrow and Monday, you're going to see fast money try to do that. But on the positive front, what I want to tell everybody is this: over the last month, I continue, as I always do, I continue to talk to investors, institutional investors, and I can tell everybody this: everyone is hiring people for cannabis, everyone is hiring analysts, everyone is hiring PMs, everyone's doing the work. And so I truly believe that we are going to see, irrespective of SAFE, obviously with SAFE, we would get a lot more and much easier flows into the sector. But I think at the right price, and I think we're, let's be honest, these companies are trading at value levels instead of at growth levels.
Yeah.
I think pretty soon we're going to start seeing some of that money come in. But I do think there's potentially some more pain between now and then, because the fast money is going to see the fact that, MSOS index has got no new cash, and they're going to try and squeeze it down. And I think that's what we're going to see. And then I just wanted to get on to reiterate to everybody, don't fall for that. I always said from one of the first calls I got on with Toby, I said, as long as you're not leveraged, you're okay. Because it doesn't matter. Just close your eyes and understand you're investing in one of the greatest growth stories this country's ever had. These stories always go through turbulent times. They always go, but the key thing is that the dips are not as low as the previous dips were. And I don't believe I don't believe Curaleaf's going to trade $3 again. So, I could be wrong, but I don't believe that. And I've been around for 30 years to see how these things happen. And I do think there's potentially some more downside. But I do also believe that a lot of very sophisticated money is looking at the sector. I have 2 to 3 calls a day, no exaggeration, from me, with major money. And I can tell you, I think you're going to see money flows come in over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Start. It's not going to be some kind of wave. It's not going to be some kind of panacea. But I think that you're going to start. People are recognizing the value of these companies. People are noticing how these companies come off. And they're now saying, hey, we would love to get a little bit. And the best thing that can happen to us is not a V-shaped recovery in share prices. The best thing that can happen to us is a bottoming and then a slow grind higher, like over time. That's the best thing that could happen in the sector. These V-shaped moves down and moves up are not good for the sector. This volatility is just not good. It scares investors. It scares institutions. They don't want to be in that kind of a stock, that kind of a market. They would much rather see a nice 12-month grind higher with, based on fundamentals, based on earnings, based on results. That's what the market, that's the best thing that could happen in this market. So I'm very hopeful. Unfortunately, I do think that the fast money guys are going to try and fuck with the market over the next, 2 to 3 sessions, maybe even longer. But I do think we're coming to very, very attractive levels at this point where you can start seeing institutions coming back in and nibbling. And
So I'm going to stop it there, but I do seriously recommend you grab the link below and listen to the entire thing, at least from 2 hours and 10 minutes on. Obviously, there's a lot of other knowledge in there that you can get from Toby, Jason, and Noah, but I just wanted to share that because Boris, again, a man of experience, self-made billionaire, 30 years of experience in the investing industry, and as one of the pioneers in this space, for him to share this knowledge with us, very much appreciated. So you can grab that link below if you want to check it out. And then there was actually this article that came out from New Cannabis Ventures, and honestly, I've not read through this article because it just arrived in my inbox right before I was going to start this video, so I just wanted to add it because it goes off of what Boris was saying, that we might see some pain on Friday and into next week, but I'd consider what the overall market is going through. MSOs are holding up fairly well, but that is because experienced hedge funds and investors might notice that MSOS has little cash left, and for that reason, they're going to try and short it and take advantage. But I wanted to share this because the title of it was Cannabis Stock Investors Are Wrong to Fear This Development, that because MSOS has little cash left, that, we're doomed. So wanted to add this in. You can grab the link below if you wanted to check it out, but I'm definitely going to be reading this later on today. And then this one came from the National Law Review, which I was excited to see because it sort of came out of nowhere and I had to dig to find it. But this was from Tuesday, January 18th. Federal cannabis reform, you can't always get what you want. The proposed reform efforts. A group of Congressional Democrats have announced a plan to push an ambitious set of cannabis reform proposals this spring. Now, we've heard that before, but it's nice to see it in writing, as the federal proposals seek to establish 21st century banking services for the nearly $18 billion industry, $24 billion as of last year, and purge the criminal records of thousands of cannabis offenders. In a memo to the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, Reps Earl Blumenauer and Barbara Lee wrote, "The growing bipartisan momentum for cannabis reform shows that Congress is primed for progress in 2022, and we are closer than ever to bringing our cannabis policies and laws in line with the American people." Yeah, that would be great if you actually keep to these words. So we'll be looking out for that. The reform proposals include the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement MORE Act, which would seek to remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act and purge records for those convicted of using cannabis. And while we definitely want this, the odds of the MORE Act actually getting passed are very slim because it does not have the bipartisan support from the Republicans. However, the SAFE Banking Act would allow cannabis industry access to an array of financial services such as commercial loans, checking accounts, and credit card processing. This is what we're holding out for, and it would obviously be the most beneficial thing for everyone in the industry, not just big tier MSOs, but small businesses and minority entrepreneurs as well. While the Medical Cannabis Research Act would remove restrictions to federal researchers studying cannabis to ensure that researchers have access to quality product, this sounds nice as a bill by itself, but if we just scheduled the plant, that would do this and also expunge all records for nonviolent drug offenders in prison. So that is what we actually want. But what is the likelihood of any of these reform measures passing? As of this time of writing, I believe that there are sufficient votes in both houses of Congress, including Republican votes, to pass cannabis reform efforts. In particular, the SAFE Act and legislation allowing increased research could become law if they receive a straight-up vote. The harder question is whether those leading the charge, Schumer and his goons, will allow for the proposal to proceed to a vote in a piecemeal fashion, or if they will insist that lawmakers vote on an entire reform package as a whole. So if the latter, I think Republicans may balk at some of the more progressive provisions, including much of the MORE Act. If that happens, we will see whether the most strident supporters of cannabis reform are willing to take a narrower victory, or if they will insist on an all-or-nothing approach. A narrower victory makes the most sense. Take this as a step, then you have a chance of winning in 2022, and you can try for more, going forward. But this comes from Whit Steinecker, who's the author of this. Apparently, he's a partner at Bradley's Cannabis Industry, which seems like a legal team. Just wanted to add this in because if the intention is put out there, there's no reason for them not to want to follow through, especially because after 1 year as president, Biden's cannabis promises remain unfulfilled. And so while this article highlights what we've gone through a whole bunch, I'm not going to go through it. You can grab it below if you want, but the last few snippets that I wanted to really pull out of it, what to expect from Biden in 2022. As Toy Hutchison, former senior advisor on cannabis to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and current CEO and president of the Cannabis Policy Project, told Cannabis Moment that it is unfortunate that states have so far lacked guidance or participation from the federal government on the cannabis reform front. But keep in mind, Democrats, including President Biden, when he was on the campaign trail, have been clear in their support for cannabis reform, and voters listened, she said. So whether it's full legalization in 2022 or simply the ability for cannabis businesses to get a bank or get tax relief, we expect to see cannabis reform because that is exactly what we were told. And that is in line with what we see from the National Law Review. So if you are American, please continue to make noise, reach out to your state reps, and just tell them how important incremental progress is, much more important than trying to get something perfect that we cannot end up getting at all. And so onto this one from Vice, as they share new studies. Oral CBD prevented COVID-19 infection in real-world patients, study suggests, which is another huge finding. While not a substitute for experimental gene therapy, CBD has the potential to prevent infections such as breakthrough infections, the study lead author said. So just wanted to highlight some parts as detailed in a paper published Thursday in the peer-reviewed journal Science Advances by a team of 33 researchers at the University of Chicago and University of Louisville, a survey of 1,212 U.S. patients taking prescribed CBD found that people taking 100 milligrams per millimeter oral doses of CBD returned positive C19 tests at much lower rates than control groups with similar medical backgrounds who did not take CBD. What? That is so fascinating. So according to the study, all of the patients were people who had seizure-related conditions, which CBD is often prescribed to treat. And so of this group, 6.2% returned positive C19 tests or a diagnosis compared to 8.9% in the control group. Among a smaller subset of patients who were likely taking CBD on the dates of their first C19 test, the effect was even more pronounced, as only 4.9% of people taking CBD became infected with C19 compared to 9% in the control group. And so our results suggest that CBD and its metabolite 7-OH-CBD can block SARS-CoV-2 infection at early and even later stages of infection, the study states. So that is very interesting, worth doing more research on, especially for early treatment. But we just wanted to share that, as you can grab the new research and the study published here. All the links will be below. And then we do have another one from Science Direct, Cannabidiol and Substance Use Disorders, Dream or Reality. So this highlighting CBD's inhibitory effects on reward properties or various abusive drugs are reported in clinical and animal studies. While CBD shows a good safety profile, mild side effect in animal, preclinical, and clinical researchers, while CBD induces its effect by modulating different receptors including TRPV1, 5-HT, CBR, and dopamine-like receptors. You can pause to read the background and methods, but the results found that several preclinical and clinical studies have proposed that CBD may be a reliable agent to inhibit the reinforcing and rewarding impact of physically dependent drugs like opioids, psychostimulants, cannabis, I think it's more mentally than physically addicting, alcohol, and nicotine. So this is more evidence highlighting that cannabis is in fact an exit drug to addictive substances and not the gateway drug, which propaganda always falsely claimed. But then conclusions, while the currently available evidence converges to suggest that CBD could effectively reduce the rewarding and reinforcing effects of addictive drugs, which is why we should deschedule it so we can further research, more preclinical and clinical studies are needed before CBD can be added to the therapeutic arsenal for treating addiction, basically saying that while we do think there's evidence here, we're not going to be the ones with the courage to push this through and actually deschedule it. So unfortunate, but just wanted to add this as well. This is from April 1st, 2022, a study from the future. Strange. On to this one from NBC. As recreational cannabis sales showered states with cash in 2021, as nearly a dozen states combined to collect $3 billion in tax revenue from recreational sales, highlighting any states that have legalized for recreational use are light years ahead of states that have not. As legal recreational use cannabis sales boomed across the U.S. in 2021, reaching new levels in nearly a dozen states, nationwide, those sales generated more than $3 billion in tax revenue for 11 states, including California, Colorado, Illinois, Michigan, and Nevada. That's higher than the $2.7 billion collected from the 10 states that allowed recreational cannabis sales in 2020, according to a report from Cannabis Policy Project. So you can take a look at the individual states here, but it's a great story from NBC highlighting the benefits of actually ending cannabis prohibition. On to some MSOs. As Harvest and Trulieve celebrate 1 year anniversary of recreational cannabis sales in Arizona. Today they announced plans to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of recreational cannabis sales in Arizona through a series of in-store activations, product specials, and celebrations. As if it's already been a year. That's wild. As Trulieve affiliated Harvest locations will have doorbuster deals on January 21st to the 22nd, and the company will host a rooftop event at the Clarendon Hotel on Saturday, January 22nd. As Harvest recorded Arizona's first sale of recreational cannabis on January 22nd, 2021, yesterday, the anniversary. This occurred shortly after voters approved Proposition 207, which legalized the possession and use of cannabis for adults. And so that was a record 58 days for Arizona to legalize and then launch the program. That's what every other state that has legalized should be doing if they were working in the best interest of the people in the state. All 17 Arizona-based Harvest dispensaries will commemorate the occasion with daily activations, including doorbuster deals, BOGO scratcher cards, and branded swag giveaways. And customers who spend more than $275 at any Arizona Trulieve affiliated store on January 20th to 2020 or January 20th and 21st will have exclusive access to the company's Clarendon Hotel rooftop celebrations. So sounds like fun. Good on you, Trulieve, for celebrating what Harvest was able to achieve before buying them up. And again, it's just crazy to think that a year has already passed. While New Cannabis Ventures reports that Curaleaf closes their $211 million Arizona acquisition of Bloom. So they announced the completion of its previously announced acquisition of Bloom Dispensaries, a vertically integrated single-state cannabis operator in Arizona. And with the close of this transaction, gives Curaleaf's retail footprint has reached 13 dispensaries in Arizona and 121 nationwide. So Boris Jordan, executive chairman, who we heard speak earlier, Bloom is an excellent strategic fit for Curaleaf as it further expands our capacity and retail footprint in Arizona with an attractive set of assets, enabling us to better serve the state's US $1.4 billion plus annual market opportunity, especially as that one continues to grow very quickly. While we got more news out of Curaleaf as they announced plans to open 2 new dispensaries in Pennsylvania. Curaleaf's latest locations in Greensburg and Wayne will increase the company's retail footprint to 14 dispensaries statewide and 125 across the country. So up from this one, which put them at 122 nationwide. After opening these locations, it'll put them up to 125 as 2 additional locations, Curaleaf Erie and Curaleaf State College, are expected to open by the end of February pending regulatory approval. So that a press release will likely come out of that in February, but they're adding 4 more dispensaries into Pennsylvania, which looks like probably the limit that they can have in that state as well. Well, I did find some more information on the deal between Whiz, Khalifa Partners and Cresco. So this comes from Cannabis Business Times as they give more information on their partnership. Cresco Labs, a vertically integrated multi-state operator and a U.S. wholesaler of branded cannabis products, today announced an exclusive partnership agreement with multi-platinum selling Grammy and Golden Globe Award nominated recording artist Wiz Khalifa Brands Khalifa Kush. Through the cultivation and product collaboration partnership, FloraCal Farms and Continuum will be the sole producer and distributor, respectively, of premium branded products featuring Khalifa Kush's signature KK strain in California. So just wanted to share this as there's more information. All of it's there so you can pause to read, but it's mostly just quotes and snippets from the people involved. While we move on to this news out of Florida, for this past week, as Florida added 2,936 patients, bringing their qualified patient count up to 664,432 patients. And while no new dispensaries were approved or opened this past week, we can take a look at the sales from January 14th to the 20th, not in dollar amounts, but in the number of milligrams of THC sold, number of milligrams of CBD sold, and the number of ounces of smokable flower sold for all the MSOs operating in the state. So if you're invested in any MSO, you can check week over week whether their market share is going up or going down to give you an idea of how your investment is doing in this very competitive state of Florida. On to this one from MJ Biz Daily for New Mexico as they double their cannabis plant count ahead of adult use sales, which is very smart to make sure that they properly can supply the demand, as this move should help the industry meet the growing demand once adult use cannabis sales start, which are slated for the spring, April 1st. And so the new range of mature cannabis plant count limit cultivators may grow are up to this. And so while it's still a very small amount, it's a small amount up to a larger, smaller amount, but with the states, with sales in the state looming coming April 1st, the increased plant count helps to ensure that supplies remain consistent for the tens of thousands of New Mexicans who participate in the existing medical cannabis program as well. So good to look out for those existing medical patients. Well, some good news out of Mississippi as the House approves medical cannabis bill with amendments. As the Mississippi House of Representatives passed an amended medical cannabis legalization bill on Wednesday on a 104-14 vote, making changes aimed at addressing concerns raised by Governor Tate Reeves. If the Senate approves the changes and then Reeves indeed signs the bill, a system to regulate and sell cannabis to registered patients could launch later this year. So good job, Mississippi lawmakers, as Mississippi's full Senate passed a version of the legalization measure last week, rejecting amendments from liberals and conservatives alike. And although the governor has remained skeptical of the bill, threatening to veto a draft version circulated late last year, he said earlier this week that it's getting better with every revision. And while they do think that they have the votes to override him if he wants to veto it, that's positive, and hopefully this will actually become law sooner than later. While out of Pennsylvania, we get this as bipartisan Pennsylvania senators to file cannabis legalization protection bill as congressional reform stalls. So this is interesting as we actually have an effort to pass a safe-like bill in an individual state. As Senators DeSanto R and Sheriff Street D distributed a co-sponsorship memo to colleagues on Tuesday unveiling their plan to file a bill that would safeguard banks and insurers against being penalized by state regulators. The senators serve as chairman and minority chairman of the Banking and Insurance Committee as well. So that's likely why they think this is an avenue. While financial institutions are generally more weary of facing consequences from federal regulators under the current policy of prohibition, the state-level reform could further empower banks to work with Pennsylvania's medical cannabis market as congressional legislators try to advance the federal policy change. So this is very interesting, and I will keep tabs on this as we move through. But this is exactly what SAFE would do on the federal level, but this would at least protect banks in this state from federal regulators trying to come after them if they were to do business with cannabis states. Well, this is good news out of South Carolina, as medical cannabis legalization bill will be on the Senate floor next week, sponsor says apparently. As Senator Tom Davis said that he's spoken to Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey about his bill, the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act, and received a commitment that it would be one of the very first things we take up in the chamber this session. Importantly, he said that there was also an agreement to consider the legislation on special order, which means that once it's taken up, senators will have to vote on it before they move forward with any other piece of legislation. and Davis gave an impassioned speech at a rally alongside patients and advocates. He brought out a large binder that said he contains 8 years of research into the issue that he will use to take on every single argument that has been raised in opposition to this bill. You need that against the propagandists, and I'm going to show that they cannot stand in the way of facts and evidence. So good job, Tom Davis, Senator out of South Carolina. Hopefully you guys can get this passed sooner than later to help those that need a medical alternative in your state. And lastly, out of Rhode Island, as apparently the governor includes cannabis legalization and expungements in a budget request. So the governor of Rhode Island has again included a proposal to legalize cannabis as part of his annual budget plan, since they couldn't get this done last year. And this time, he also added new language to provide for automatic cannabis expungements in the state, which would be great. And so in general, McKee's plan would allow adults 21 and older to purchase and possess up to 1 ounce of cannabis, though it would not provide a homegrown option. Adults could also store up to 5 ounces of cannabis in secured storage in their primary residence. However, the effective date for the proposed bill would be April 1st, 2023. So not even this April, next April, which is very annoying. However, slow and steady progress is better than nothing out of Rhode Island. Well, we've got some other states with some less fortunate news as deadline looms for decisions concerning New Jersey's recreational cannabis sales. And this is, again, the perfect example of when the culture of the private sector becomes too bureaucratic and too slow and, oh, we'll get to it when we get to it. It really only harms the citizens of the states that you're supposed to be working for. As February 22nd was the day by law, apparently, that New Jersey was set to open adult use recreational sales or make a decision on a date. And cannabis industry insiders say that they don't see that happening. As Patrick Janssen, Curaleaf Northeast Regional President, says, it seems that the deadline is probably going to be hard to meet. We still haven't seen finalized regulations, which is going to be key for us to know what we need to be doing. And Curaleaf says, in preparation for adult use sales, it's ramped up its operations, including hiring more staff and expanding cultivation. And now it has excess product with no market to sell to and has to continuously, that's probably a typo, has to expand its storage. But get this, as Arizona legalized adult use around the same time New Jersey did, and it has already made about $175 million in taxes for its state and citizens. And so at that rate, it is estimated that New Jersey has missed out on $126 million in possible tax dollars because those hired to launch the adult use program on time simply could not do their jobs. And all this is doing is pissing off the people in New Jersey that obviously want an adult use program launched, that voted for it, and those that are paying to operate in the state, that are paying money to properly supply the demand, as the regulators are just making it harder. And Boris even said on that call, he says it's just straight incompetence. Not surprising from the public sector, sadly. This one comes from MJ Biz Daily, as sadly, a lawsuit further stalled the Georgia medical cannabis market. So the launch of Georgia's limited medical cannabis market will apparently have to wait even longer because of an ongoing lawsuit over the state's licensing process. The delay comes even though 6 medical cannabis cultivation licenses were awarded last year, and a bill was passed to allow up to 30 dispensaries to sell oils. And so while there's no launch date in sight at the moment, in large part because of a lawsuit filed by Georgia Atlas, one of the losing applicants for cultivation license, the company filed suit against the state after the winners were announced last summer, alleging the process was lacking in transparency, objectivity, and fairness, and was influenced by backroom deals. So while these are quite the allegations, we'll have to let due process sort this one out, but hopefully they can get to the bottom of it sooner than later for those in Georgia that need a safe medicinal alternative. And lastly, this is just very sad news out of Kansas, as apparently medical cannabis hearings were canceled after Senate GOP leader reroutes House-passed bill. So apparently while there was actually progress being made in Kansas. When it gets to the Senate, this is what happens. Now there's a question of whether lawmakers will be motivated to introduce another separate bill and try to move it through both chambers, requiring another House vote, as the Senate president seemed to temper expectations in recent remarks, telling Kansas City Star that not a single member of his caucus has expressed that the issue was important to them. Not a single member of his caucus can acknowledge the current opioid epidemic and the need for a safe medical alternative. So I feel for anyone in Kansas, if you need a safe medicinal alternative, move. There are no excuses. Just move. Get to a state where democracy and your rights are still being respected. This Forbes article asks, could medical cannabis be Italy's next great opportunity? It's kind of a silly question at this point because cannabis is any country's next great opportunity if they have the common sense to end prohibition. But I wanted to share this snippet down here because they are working on implementing medical cannabis in Italy, but there's also a nationwide referendum expected to take place in early 2022, and Italian voters have the opportunity to vote in favor of legalization of cannabis. So obviously that would be great to see, and that would push for an adult use program as well in time, but working with top global experts in the medical cannabis sector, at least starting there, there is a way to support and better understand the rapid regulatory changes. So that would be great news out of Italy. Hope that referendum comes soon, because I'd heard also that it would be in January of 2022, but there's been no news as of yet. And I was looking, I couldn't find any dates. So hopefully it will be in the coming months. But then we've got this one from European Cannabis from Todd Harrison. So thank you. He's sharing what BBG Intelligence, Bloomberg Intelligence has to say, as Germany's plan to legalize adult use cannabis could open up an 80 billion European market in 1 to 2 years, driven by the continent's aging population and patients' rising demand for natural options to traditional drugs, which is hilarious because the natural plants were always the traditional drugs. But companies exposed to Europe's medical cannabis markets include Sin Biotech, Canovum, Curaleaf, Toray Brands, and Aurora Cannabis. And so lastly, just jumping back over to Canada, as retail trade sales by province and territory did come out for November, and while we've been seeing increases month over month into October, November was the first month where we saw a decent drop. However, I wanted to add that the drop is not because of our most populated province that is driving all of the sales, as Ontario has continuously seen an increase, and so from September we've seen 141 million in sales to 145 million in sales to 148 million. So at least the opening of new stores in Ontario has not slowed that growth, and we are seeing the growth continue, but the slowness especially is coming out of Quebec, for example, as they just do not open more stores because for some reason they don't want to properly supply the demand, and then out of Alberta and British Columbia. So just wanted to add that at least Ontario is still growing strong, and as long as our most populated province continues to open more stores to properly supply the demand, we're going to see a good amount of growth out of them. But this is really where Quebec, our second most populated province, ought to pick up the slack and open 1,000 more stores, much like Ontario's done. Then they'd see a lot more consistent sales. And so lastly, just wanted to share this one from Normal, as a growing percentage of cannabis consumers are transitioning to the illicit market, because that's what happens when you end prohibition and you allow people to go into shops and you normalize the industry and you allow people to know what they're buying. They're going to make the switch. And so this comes out of Waterloo, Canada. A growing number of Canadians who consume cannabis are obtaining it from legal marketplace, according to data published in the Journal of Drug and Alcohol Dependence. Investigators affiliated with the University of Waterloo School of Public Health Science surveyed nearly 5,000 Canadian adults who acknowledged having purchased cannabis flower within the past few years. And researchers reported that the percentage of consumers switching from the illicit market to the illicit market increased from 2019 to 2020, and that the majority of respondents, 58%, now acknowledge obtaining cannabis flower from licensed retailers. So the study's authors attributed these changes in behavior to increases in retail availability and falling prices for cannabis products available in the legal marketplace. But this is again a big highlight. Retail availability, enough stores so that you take people away from the black market, and then enough stores so that the prices come down due to the competition. That is something that is going to drive more people into those stores and out of the black market, giving organized crime less power and driving more money into the actual economy. These findings are consistent with those of a 2021 study published in the journal Health Reports, which found that nearly 70% of cannabis consumers reported obtaining cannabis from a legal source, up from 47% in 2019. So good to see progress out of Canada. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great week, everybody.